The phrase "fresh from the clothesline" brings to mind laundered clothes or quilts blowing in the breeze on a clothesline, or fresh ideas with a nod to the past. Both images are correct when applied to the techniques featured by my guest. Please welcome Darlene Zimmerman, who is an expert and specialist in giving a fresh way of looking at vintage-style quilts and projects. Darlene, what attracted me to your quilts was the 1930s style and feel.
That's right, Nancy. Many people feel that the quilts remind them of their grandma or of their childhood. My Garden Sunshine is such a quilt. Only small and large triangles are used in the design. Putting 4 units together gives the look of a flower. Any combination of fabrics will work as long as you divide the fabrics into lights and darks.
Fresh from the clothesline quilts, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
This quilt of Darlene's really reminds me of a fresh spring day, and these flowers, the colorations of the 1930s fabric. And we're going to start off with this block. And the block is comprised of 4 units.
That's correct.
And the units are a little bit smaller. They're 1/4 of the block, and this is what we're going to make. Triangle and 2 smaller tall triangles.
That's right, a triangle within a square unit, which you see in a lot of traditional blocks.
We'd like to make a fresh approach to this, an easy approach, so Darlene has cut 3.5-inch wide strips of fabric. Using vintage fabric, you could use other types of fabric, but show us how it works.
Okay, you could use these tools or you could create templates from the book. And with one of the fabrics, I'm going to use the large triangle. I'll line up the top of the triangle with the edge of the strip and a line at the bottom of the triangle at the bottom of the strip. And I cut both directions for the very first cut. The next cut, I'd simply reverse the tool and cut again. So that gives me the big triangle. Now the smaller triangles, I cut with the smaller tool, lining it up the exact same way with the tip at the top of the strip and a line at the bottom of the strip. I cut, and one additional thing, I go back and I nip off the little corner.
And that will make lining things up so much easier without that fabric.
Exactly. The next cut, you'd simply reverse the triangle to cut again. Now you have a pair of triangles. And the easiest way to sew these together without making a mistake, because it's so easy to sew them like this, but we want to make a triangle within a square. So let's lay them right sides together. And I've opened up the pair because they're not interchangeable.
And you can see that little trimming area. You can match the fabrics identically. And then do some chain stitching.
Exactly, like we have here.
So here you can see a close-up of chain stitching many units together, as many as you may need, on sewing the small triangle to one side. And here is a small chained unit. Our viewers can see, and then you do some pressing.
And it would look like this. Then we can lay it back down to see where the second side fits. Right sides together again. It lines up the same way in the corner.
That's what I like about that.
That's what makes it doable.
Yeah, sure.
Because it is a very sharp angle. And at the opposite end, the little triangles are also going to line up. That's a second way to align this triangle.
And when you're finished with that, you're going to do some pressing again. And I'll just finger press for ease.
And there's your triangle within a square.
Now the layout may confuse you at first, because when I looked at this I thought, how are these going to be laid out? So we'll let Darlene do that.
This is quite easy. One this way, one that way.
So one going east, one going south.
You could make a second pair identical and then spin them around to make your little flower block.
But there's more.
Yes, you can do so many things with this block. Let's just stretch these out. Put a square in the center and some squares at the corners, and what you have is a 4-pointed star.
Then an 8-pointed star is next.
Exactly. So if we just change the coloration,
Putting the light where the dark is. And
and we suddenly have an 8-pointed star.
so vintage fabrics, vintage quilt patterns really have a lot of versatility and can be made quickly. They don't always have to be large. You could make small little units just to try out your hand at making this garden quilt.
Exactly.
And it makes a really sweet little home decor piece. Next, we're taking a novel approach when working with traditional quilt blocks. Imagine this design set with the blocks in a straight row. It could be rather boring. We'll show you how to set any block wonky style, giving the design a fresh appeal. We're not going to go through the details of creating this block, which happens to be
a friendship star,
but rather showing you how to add triangles on the side.
just to set the block askew. So you
And
can
it's attractive.
You can create those long skinny triangles either with a tall triangle tool, or you can draw a triangle that is 3 times as tall as it's wide. So we have a 6-inch block that we're setting askew. So we would cut our rectangle 6 inches tall by 2 inches wide
And that's the finished sides. This happens to be 6.5 inches.
at this point. And then be sure to add seam allowances on all 4 sides to give you the template that you need. So you can use your template or the tool to cut your triangles.
And the fabric that you're working with is cut the width of the unfinished block. So this is
That's right.
6.5 inches.
And you would do that for any size block. You'd always cut it the same size. And I've lined up the tool with a small point at the bottom of the strip and the line at the top of the strip. Simply reverse it for your next cut.
And obviously for each block you'll need 4 of these, and you can cut multiple layers at once.
Exactly. So once the triangles are cut, we will lay the diagonal edge, the longest edge of the triangle, against the edge of the block. And we'd want to center it because you can see it's a little bit longer. So if we center it, we take care of that little problem. And line up the next one with the wide end against the narrow end. Do that on all 4 sides, and you can see that you will have created a block that's set askew.
I like that design. It gives it motion.
It does, and it makes it a lot more interesting. Now you can do the same thing with something that isn't a piece block. Here's a flower.
Fussy cut fabric in the middle. It's very contemporary rather than traditional.
Exactly. It could also be a photograph or something
Sure.
you've embroidered.
Now this unique shape can also be its own block, so to speak. It wouldn't be
Exactly.
square, it'd be rectangular. And this is another contemporary style, and this just shows what
Here you see
flow.
the divided rectangles in different sizes, and if you put 2 of those together, you create this type of a unit.
So here are 2 put together in obviously very different colors. Quite contrasting, but you can see that tall look,
Or spin them around and you create a very different looking triangle.
So with divided rectangles, you can offset a design, creating it wonky style as Darlene has done on her quilt, or you can put those triangles together so that they have a very contemporary appeal. It's another fresh approach to quilting. If you don't have a green thumb, produce quilts with flowers. These fabric flowers are created with large hexagons, and they are set together in rows. These rows feature 60-degree triangles. They're sewn at opposing sides, all without set-in seams. It's a novel approach. Now, hexagon is not untraditional. It's a very traditional pattern in block.
That's right.
And often, in the 30s and 40s, they used yellow as a neutral background.
That's true also. But usually hexagon quilts the hexagons are set directly to each other, and you have to do set-in seams.
Which means,
and-
oh boy, getting those points to match. Very tricky.
Exactly, and often they're hand-pieced.
Well, we're not going to do any setting in seams, all straight seams, not hand-pieced, and you're
We're going to rotary cut it.
Right, not cut by hand.
So you can use a template to cut your hexagons whatever
Common.
size, or you can use a tool. In this case, I have a strip cut the size of my tool, and I will simply lay it on the strip. 2 sides are cut just by cutting the strip. I've cut 2 more sides. I could spin this around, but for ease, I will just cut it like this today, and I have my hexagons cut. And I would continue down the strip the same way, just making sure that it always fits on the strip. To cut the yellow triangles, again, you could use a template or this tool where I've lined up the top of the triangle at the top of the strip and a line at the bottom of the strip, and simply cut, reverse for the next cut. So those are the pieces we need.
We talked about opposing sides of these hexagon shapes, and that's the next step.
Yes, we will lay out our hexagons so that we can add triangles to opposite corners, and when we do that, we create a diamond shape, and these will be easier to sew together.
Now, meeting right sides together, sewing with 1/4 of an inch seam allowances, and chain stitching are the norm for almost all of the techniques we'll be showing in this 2-part series. And notice how the flattened edge of the triangle aligns with the hexagon shape.
Just perfectly for sewing.
And that would then be chain stitching one piece right after another. And here's that sewn diamond shape. And then they are put together in rows.
Very simply this way. And those seams are going to line up right there.
But you don't line them up so they align at this point. You have to meet right sides together. I guess we have more than one here. Right sides together and offset them by 1/4 of an inch, or just about, and I find my fingernail width is about 1/4 of an inch, so I usually use that as a guide, and place a pin. And here you can see that I'm chain stitching the rows together, the pieces of the rows, and as I get to that pin, I can simply remove it and then continue sewing onto the next piece. After you have sewn several together, Darlene, we're just going to lay this on the finished quilt so that you can see that you'll have rows and rows of your quilt. And then just
Very
sew.
easy to sew together, just like any other quilt pattern.
You'd have to match a little bit, but
A little
not
bit of
bad.
matching.
So no set-in seams,
Exactly.
all straight edges, and you can grow flowers from your fabric stash. Crazy Quilts utilize cotton fabrics in irregular shapes. In making this quilt, you will learn an easy way to cut and sew those unusual shaped pieces. Now, crazy quilting is nothing new. Darlene, you have a nice collection of
do.
vintage quilts, and we're going to start by showing you where the inspiration for this technique came from. This is a rather old quilt.
Yes, it
Top.
is. Comes from the turn of the century, and it was a Victorian crazy quilt. Lots of silks, satins, velvets. The silks are deteriorating, which is
Yeah,
common
sure.
with the crazy quilts.
And the backing, there's a foundation piece that the quilts are sewn to, and it's more scraps of fabric.
Exactly. And that's what helps hold it all together and gives you a base on which to sew.
So that's, you can use your scraps and keep them, don't have to be on
Exactly.
grain. So this is vintage with silks, velvets, and then we have vintage with cotton.
This would be a 1930s example. Minnesota housewife liked the idea of a crazy quilt, had lots of scraps, but she created hers with cotton fabrics, and she used probably sugar sacks or feed sacks
Sure.
as her backing. But
Yeah.
it's made in the same manner.
And we're going to start work with cottons. You could use other fabrics as well, but this is the quilt you saw on the clothesline just a few moments ago. And pay special attention to the center.
Exactly. You need to start with an irregular shaped center. It needs to have 5 sides instead of 3 or 4 because that helps to give you an irregular shape. And you can also cut something out of a vintage piece of embroidery. You could put a photo in the center or whatever you choose if you wish to highlight the center.
Now we have a tool that has 5 sides. You can use that. You could just cut a piece of fabric with 5 sides. The choice is yours, but the foundation is important too.
Exactly. Now I'm using a stabilizer fabric here. I want something that's lightweight but yet firm, but I could also use a piece of scrap fabric if I chose. We start with the shape that we've cut for the center, and I position it approximately in the middle, and then I cut random strips, usually in a wedge shape, to use as my strips around the center. So now I'm ready to start sewing. I just place my fabrics right sides together, and I will sew the normal 1/4 inch seam.
You're using a patchwork foot.
Right, just my normal 1/4 inch foot, and I just want to sew to the edge of the patch and stop. Cut my thread, take it out from under the machine, and I fold it back, just finger crease it back, and now I want to trim everything even with the next edge that I'm going to sew on. So I will take it to my cutting mat, fold the stabilizer out of the way so I don't cut that, and use my ruler and rotary cutter and just trim it off. Now I'm ready to add the next strip.
So you're going clockwise around.
Exactly. Just keep going around the circle until you've filled up covered the entire piece of stabilizer.
So you can sew some more and show how when you're adding these pieces, it goes very simply and you're just working around and around.
So this is something anybody could do even without any prior sewing experience, because there's no way to really make a mistake.
I'd like you to show that trimming section again, because not every technique that I've seen does this, and I think this makes such a difference.
It really helps because you can see what area still needs to be covered, plus it gives you a nice straight edge for your next seam. And now you can see the next edge where you're going to add your next strip. And it always gives you a straight line to sew on.
Darlene, here is a block that has almost all of it's been covered. That whole foundation has been covered.
So if I turn it over, you can see from the back that I need to trim around those edges to really clean it up. But then it's ready to add your embroidery, embellishment, if you so choose.
And you do not need to add additional trimming if you'd like it. And the sample, you can see it's just fabric and it looks very nice and it's pieced together. But if you would like to showcase and make one block, perhaps making a handbag, you could use decorative stitches, hand stitches. I think this is very sweet. And let me show you just a vintage looking table topper that Darlene created, and I used trim.
Lots of trim, beads, embroidery stitches. It's really up to you. The people who used to make crazy quilts in the Victorian time felt the more you added to it, the better it was.
Well, this is certainly attractive. Starting with that 5-sided shape in the middle gives you a great foundation for an artistic, crazy patchwork. It goes without saying that learning new skills can improve your life. When those skills are learned in Central America from North American volunteers, the result is improved lives for both the students and the teachers. I'd like you to welcome Linda Pratt. Linda is the coordinator for the Wisconsin-Nicaragua Partners of the Americas. And Linda, I searched you out because you have been teaching and your volunteers have been working with the Nicaraguan women teaching sewing, plus many other things, but it's a very inspiring story.
Thank you.
Now, you've been involved with the Partners for the Americas for how many years now?
13,
And you've been to Nicaragua how many times?
35.
35 times. So when you go to Nicaragua and you're working with the volunteers, tell us a little bit about how you're relaying your information and education.
Well, I was a former home economics teacher, which you don't even call it that anymore, right?
Okay.
And I went down to Nicaragua and saw that they were doing beautiful work with their sewing skills. And also, some of them need help with sewing skills. So I joined the Wisconsin-Nicaragua Partners and became one of the leads for going down to Nicaragua.
This is an interesting program. It was started many years ago. Almost, you told me it was have its 50th anniversary.
Yes, that's right.
And that it first started during the Kennedy administration.
That's right.
And tell me again the name of
The Alliance for Progress.
Alliance for Progress. Then each state had a partner country in Latin America and
Or the Caribbean.
Okay, so we happen to live in Wisconsin, so our partners country.
They chose Nicaragua.
And
I think because of the climate and the terrain.
Okay, and initially you were telling me that there are 100 centers, and they initially started teaching sewing. Now here's a picture of one of the sewing centers or learning centers, and they have. Tell us about it's outside.
Yes. Lots of the centers are in people's homes. This one is on Julita's porch, and she's there because it's very dark inside their house. So they want to have some place where they'll be able to see. And I think you can see in the picture also that she has treadle sewing machines there.
Sure.
The name of her center is the Dolls and Embroidery, because they do beautiful freehand embroidery on the treadle sewing machines.
It's really amazing. And then there's also a warehouse and a central area in Nicaragua where you come together and disperse information.
Right. Well, not only information, but all kinds of equipment and supplies.
So if someone is a volunteer there, tell me their typical, what they would do during a typical trip.
Usually go to visit about 3 different centers to give some kinds of learning skills that they're going to teach. And then they visit the country and find out more about the country and meet the people.
And giving them these skills, you were a past teacher. It's you had a different classroom.
That's right.
And what is the most rewarding part for you?
I think knowing the women in Nicaragua.
I'm sure you have many close friends.
Yes, I do.
Being there 35 times is amazing. We're going to have Linda back next time on Sewing with Nancy, and for a follow-up, learning how you worked with the doll clothes. And also how women in that area now are supplementing their income because of this great partnership that you can become involved with. So we'll have you come back and just for our next program and share that. In the meantime, if you would like to learn more about the Partners of the Americas, and every state has a partner with a Latin American or a Caribbean country, you can go to nancyzieman.com. You'll find everything Sewing with Nancy on that area. You'll click on Nancy's Corner and you can get information about the Partners of America, the Wisconsin-Nicaragua project, as well as a link to other areas. We are going to have our second program next time on the Fresh from the Clothesline Quilts with our guest Darlene Zimmerman. And you can watch, if you'd like to rewatch that program, you can rewatch it on nancyzeman.com. All 52 programs of the current Sewing with Nancy series, and of course the past series will be there too. So you can find all things Sewing with Nancy there. Thank you for joining us as always. Linda, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Darlene Zimmerman has written a fully illustrated book entitled Fresh from the Clothesline Quilts that serves as the reference for this two-part series. It's $16.49 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2519. Order item number W0937, Fresh from the Clothesline Quilts. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzeman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zeman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zeman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.